Hello, I'm Miranda. A good friend of mine here in Albuquerque is launching a Kickstarter campaign for a board game. The game is called Terrenus, the Game of Gods. It's a multi-phase strategy game where players create a world, populate it, build temples, then go to war. I was able to help play test it and really enjoyed the game, so I thought I would do an interview with the game's creator to help him promote his Kickstarter. So I'm here with Thane Morgan of Thane's Games, and we're going to talk a little bit today about your Kickstarter that you're launching for a game called Terrenus. And why don't you tell us a little bit about it, kind of where the idea came from?
Okay, so the original idea of the game came from the Illuminatus trilogy, and in it they had a theory that kept creeping up in different parts of the book of civilization going through 5 phases, or sort of devolving through 5 phases. But anyway, it kind of made me want to do a Civ-type game that would have those 5 phases, and each phase would be its own different game, but they would all build on what came before. And as that developed over the years, off and on, of course, it sort of became this, well, it's not really working as a Civ game, but it is kind of working as like a god moving things around on the board.
Kind of a very, this is my toy playground kind of idea.
Exactly.
How long were you working on it?
I think it probably started about 8 years ago, and most of that time I wasn't actually working on it. It was just something I'd pick up and try moving some pieces around, or try some new mechanism for developing technology or whatever, creating more population. Okay. And but seriously, working on it since it became this gods playing with a world of mortals concept. That was about 2 years ago.
How entry level would you say this game would be for somebody who's either very familiar with strategy games to a person just kind of, an adult but still like kind of new to very complex games?
I think it's all the games themselves are very simple. Yeah. I don't think there's any particular phase that's that complicated. I've got it listed as 13 and older. I would guess that there's probably 9-year-olds that were capable of doing it.
Oh yeah, you always have like just the really sharp ones. I agree. I think that is one of the games where, you certainly can learn the rules straightforward enough. You're like, okay, here's my tile placement, put these guys out. But the game can definitely ramp up in complexity once you start trying to find that fine balance of strategy. So it actually is a really wide range of player experience.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the meat of the actual game. I understand it's broken into 4 distinct phases, which are almost like mini games in and of themselves. You've got the first phase, which is the world building phase, I believe.
Yeah, creation.
Creation phase.
So in the creation phase, the gods are going to build the world that the rest of the game is played on. And they do this by placing tiles. Each god will place 10 tiles, and they'll score points on how many edges of those tiles meet up with the tiles that are already down. And then also by completing terrain features. And the larger the terrain feature. Right.
And then you don't have to, when you get those tiles, you get 2 at a time.
You get 2 tiles at a time. If you don't like how either of them are going to be placed, you can throw them out and take a 3rd tile.
Which you have to play, but you can put down 1 or 2 tiles each turn, but only up to 10.
Right.
Okay.
You only ever get 10 tiles for the phase.
Right. And so then, so you're doing that, and then you're matching the terrain types, yeah?
Right. So each tile that you place, all of the terrain on the edges needs to match what's down. So your plains have to meet your plains, your forests have to match your forests. And as you do that, you end up getting growing terrain features. You'll get a long forest or a square forest, or, they'll stretch across the board.
Yeah, and they're always going to be unique because, the direction of the board can change. And in general, each of the tiles is going to have either 3 or 4 of the terrain features on them.
All of the tiles have 4 terrain features on them. There was a lot of work that went into designing the tiles so that they would match up, so that players would be able to find good plays consistently.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is because the board is organically grown and competitively grown, the game board is different every single time you play it, and radically different, not just like a little minor change, but it will dramatically affect it'll dramatically affect how the players play the rest of the game. So once the world is created, the next thing that gods do is they populate the world. And so you put the finger of God down on a square, and life spreads out from it into 4 directions. And you're trying to fill up terrain features as you put the tribes down, and you're trying to put tribes down in areas of the board that will matter for the rest of the game.
Right. So for springing life into existence, when you're placing that first token down, you have 2 different patterns that you're going to use when populating the world. You have your star pattern and your cross pattern. Now, when would you want to use these?
So in the star pattern, life spreads out to the corners of your origin square, and that means that the tribes are a little bit more spread out. They can't support each other as well, but it can really help you fill up several terrain features at once. The cross pattern, where you come out on the edges of that origin square, it typically works better for keeping your tribes close together where they'll be able to support each other. But when you have several plays in a row in a given area, 2 cross patterns, they start to conflict with each other, whereas 2 star patterns next to each other just complement each other perfectly. So it's a real decision as to how you approach bringing life to a given area of the board.
Right, because you're going to overlap tribes on top of others up until to what the terrain feature can actually hold. And anything that it can't hold, you can't put down. So your pattern might even dictate how many of your, 5 tokens you can even put down.
Yeah. Each play you have the potential of placing up to 5 tribes, but overall you've got 40 tribes, which is a
mighty number of tribes.
That's right. So once the world is fully populated and all the gods have put their 40 tribes down, you move on to the construction phase, and there you start making the tribes migrate, and you can imagine them following a talking bird or a pillar of flame or whatever stupid thing mortals will follow around. They'll start picking up the stacks from one square to the next, and then when you finally get enough guys in one spot, they'll try to build a temple and stop their tireless wandering.
Yay, temples.
Yay, yeah, exactly. Time to set this burden down and pick up a new one. So,
now there's some, it kind of auto-triggers, right, once you hit a certain number of tokens?
Yeah, once you get to 5, the tribes will start trying to build a temple to whichever god has the majority. And if no god has the majority of tribes in that stack, then they need to keep moving.
Which is where you can kind of game even this phase. That's part of the strategy, too, of seeing how tall you can get your stack and kind of how many of your rival gods, I guess, tribes you can take.
Yeah, so you only need 5 tribes to come in, but they don't have to be your tribes. You can try to capture other people's tribes, and if you have 3 of yours and 2 of theirs, they're going to build a temple to you, and you convert their followers into your followers. And so
but you can kind of make a mistake there too, right? You never want to end up letting the other tribes outpopulate you.
Right. When you're moving, you never let them outnumber you. Otherwise, the other god will take over the movement.
Right. You lose control of that movement at that point. So,
yeah.
So don't do it.
So now that you've got a world filled with temples, it's time to go to war and defile your opponent's temples. And to do that, in the war phase, you get to summon monsters, and they get to move around the board, and when they land on an opponent's temple, they defile it. And I'll leave that to your imagination as to what that...
Terrible thing. And you can
Apparently she thinks of something horrible when the monster defiles it. I just think of them as tipping over the furniture. Anyway.
Or you can summon a hero to slay said monster.
The heroes do come out, and they are designed to go out and kill monsters, because that's what heroes do.
Now, in order to even bring them out, you need your temples to summon these monsters and heroes.
Yeah, each of your temples becomes a summoning point for your minions. And as the temples get defiled, it becomes more and more difficult for your minions to be summoned, and you have to spend your own points of magic. Each god has 10 points of magic to spend on this phase, and you can use it to summon minions to defile temples. You can use it to speed up a minion. Yeah. You can use it to recall a minion back to your hand. Right. And if there's a lot of people sitting on your temples preventing you from summoning, you can just purge all of them off of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, it happens in big multiplayer games pretty frequently where a lot of people will sit down on
the same.
Yeah, the same place.
They all start ganging up on each other. So that's kind of nice. You have a counter even to, that strategy. So, I mean, that kind of covers, I guess, the game in a nutshell. I don't know how long we've been talking, but
really
mighty nutshell.
One of those
overall,
Monsanto nutshells that they've been promising that could talk to us.
Well, overall, I mean, you go over each phase, and the game sounds pretty complex, and it can get really complex, but again, like, each individual phase, when you break it out, is very manageable, I guess.
Yeah.
So
the rules are simple, the strategies can be complex. Yeah. And that's really what I want in a game.
Oh, absolutely. It adds to replay value, and as so many players get more experience with it, then they try to do the more advanced strategies against each other, which is really fun. And it also feels a lot like the game, the type of game if you were to imagine these petty caricatures of Greek gods like hanging out on a Friday night board. This is the kind of game I could imagine them playing.
And that's what I'm going for. It's a bunch of petty gods creating a mortal world for no better reason than to just show each other up.
Which really,
that's a great.
I could be on board with this. So, but yeah, so there's gonna be a link to the Kickstarter at the end of this video. And Thane, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about the game with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Go.